Tourism trends for those seeking off the beaten track. We talked to one tour company whose clients appreciate the trashy and dark corners of great cities. Also, the back-to-school hype is here. Tips on how to save. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Welcome to Globe Now. Here's a snapshot of the Canadian tourist. 14.4 million trips were made over the course of a year ending in May 2014. That is up 1.8%. Where did they go? Well, a StatsCan report from 2012 gives us an idea. Mexico, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic. You can see an all-inclusive beach resort theme in there. White sandy beaches, mojitos, and lots of sunscreen. But topping the list, the United States. It's where we spent the most nights and the most money. Take New York City, for example. Very popular with Canadians. But is there anything new to be seen in the Big Apple? Well, Dylan Thuras is the CEO of Atlas Obscura, a company that explores the world's hidden treasures, and we've reached him in New York City. Welcome, Dylan.
Thanks for having me, Affan.
What is an example of a hidden treasure in, say, New York City?
There are many, some in places as familiar as Times Square and some at the edges of the city. So one example is there's an area called Coney Island Creek where there is a sunken submarine, home built to find treasure in the 1970s, and it's been there since the 80s. And this is a short walk from the Coney Island Boardwalk. In Times Square, there's an art installation that emanates sound from the bottom of one of the grates, and you can watch 10,000 people walk past, and then one will stop and notice that there's something unusual going on. So they're really all over the place.
And what's this I read somewhere on your site, that you also take visitors to a trash dump?
Yeah, there's a place called Dead Horse Bay in Rockaway, and it is a 100-year-old trash dump. It is a place where people were putting their bottles and refuse at the turn of the century, and it has basically exploded onto the beach. But 100 years later, it doesn't feel like a trash dump. It kind of feels like a treasure trove. Interesting.
So who wants to go there and why?
I actually think most people like to go to these kinds of places. It allows you, if you're a local, it allows you to see your city in a new way. And if you're a tourist, it allows you to go back and talk about something that maybe not everyone has heard about already. So it gives you a chance for a new experience.
I mean, there's an aspect to this that sounds niche, almost fringe. Is there enough interest in terms of sustaining a business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that most people really want to experience places with an interesting story, with a sense of authenticity and finding out something new, being delighted, surprised by the place they go to. It's a disappointment in a way to go to a city to travel and to see the same 5 things that every other person has seen and have very similar experiences. I think people want to do new and interesting and exciting things, and I think the things on the edge are exciting and interesting to a really broad group of travelers and people.
In other words, people want to tell their friends they've done really novel and interesting things.
I think that's part of it. I think that's certainly part of it. But I also think there's genuine curiosity there. I mean, I think the desire to do something interesting is real, and I think people are more willing to take risks now because we all have iPhones in our pockets and Google Maps. People are, I think, more willing to get a little bit farther off the beaten path and maybe do something that isn't in the top 10 list.
I mean, in a lot of ways, what you're describing is not the glossy, airbrushed, exotic travel destination. It feels almost anti-tourism. I've seen it described, in places like that. Is that, a phrase or a term that you're comfortable with?
I mean, I'm pro-tourist, but I just want tourists to take a chance. I want them to do something more interesting. A great example of this is in Florence. There's the Uffizi, which is a wonderful destination and certainly worth visiting despite the 4-hour lines. But a short walk on either side, you can cross the Ponte Vecchio and go about 10 minutes and get to a museum called La Specola, which is the greatest collection of wax anatomical models ever built. You can also go around the corner and go to the Museum of the History of Science and see, among other many amazing exhibits, you can see Galileo's middle finger, which was plucked off his bony skeleton 100 years after he was buried. These are things that I think most tourists would really enjoy seeing. So I'm pro-tourist. I just want them, I guess maybe I would say it's anti-tourist anti-tourist trap. It's anti-tourist circuit. It is pro-exploration. It's maybe turning a tourist into a traveler.
Great. Well, great talking to you, Dylan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we want to hear from you. Do any of those activities and destinations interest you? And how have your tourist destination choices changed over the years? Tweet us at Globe Now. Well, if you're going to travel, now is the time to do it since summer is winding down. In less than 2 weeks, a majority of students in Canada will be heading back to school. And for many parents, that means it's time for spending on school supplies and new outfits. Well, consumer expert Carrie K. Taylor says you shouldn't get caught up in all the back-to-school shopping hype. Here's why.
A lot of parents spend at least, between $200 and $400 to kit out their kids in clothing and school supplies. So it's a huge expense. My number one tip is to wait for the school list. What happens is schools post a mandatory list of school supplies students need. So don't buy anything until you have that list, because it's a huge waste of money to stock up on crayons if your kid really needs markers. My number one tip for electronics is to go refurbished. What refurbished is an item is sent back to the manufacturer either because a customer's changed their mind or because it has a small flaw, and it gets fixed and it gets resold at a huge discount. If your student really wants that latest iGadget, get them to contribute some of their own money to the purchase, or get them to buy the whole thing, because they're going to learn the value of $1 and they're going to appreciate that item a lot more and for a lot longer. Don't buy all your back-to-school clothing in August or early September. Wait for the big sales in October, because that's when retailers are going to blow out that stock. So, buy a few key items for your student, a new pair of jeans, a new pair of shoes, the stuff they really need so they can start school fresh. But wait for the big sales, because you're going to save at least 30 to even 60%. Also, your student's going to have a better idea of what's cool to wear in school during that time. So all in all, back to school is a bit of a money grab for retailers. It's the second biggest retail shopping spree right after Christmas. So I think parents need to be careful with how much they spend during this time, because you can spend money later in the year as well.
Well, that's all for today's show. If you've got a moment, hop onto Twitter. What are your tips when it comes to back-to-school shopping? And can you resist all the back-to-school noise? Tweet us at Globe Now. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Thanks for watching.